Alright, another go around. I got the new chain tensioner. This is an OEM part, original equipment manufacturer. It's going to cost a little bit more, but it is unaltered. The thing that you see here is that this little tab, this extension, is unsupported. The back is cut in here, so it doesn't have very good strength. If you get a little chain slap that goes on, and that possibly is what caused the failure of the first part. After all, this adjuster is going back and forth like this as the chain is rotating in this direction around the back of it on the sprocket. So when it goes in that direction, you might get a little chain slap on the tensioner under there, and that's not a good thing. The fact that that is not supported on the back of the tensioner on this side is, I think, really maybe the main problem with the chain tensioner. So far I've only seen 2 failures, and they've both failed in this place. This was a non-OEM part, and I've seen pictures of OEM parts that also break in the same location. Now, I've worked on the tensioner shaft, and I've taken a fine file and I've worn it down a little bit in this area above the hole. Neither the old one or the new one is slack enough. I've taken the new one and I've worn it down a bit, and I'm going to install that. Get a little oil in there, a little 30 weight. Okay, so now just by pushing on it without too much difficulty, it squishes down. So that should be adequate. It's warmed up, it'll feed through a bit quicker. Alright, notice that I've put the original tensioner back in as it is, broken. Both the skid pad's broken off and the aluminum flange. What's broken off can't break again. So that's the way that is. I also have that flat spot filed on this edge here of the shaft to allow a certain amount of oil to get by, so it doesn't pound on the chain too much and wear too quickly. You don't want to file that too much, but just a little bit. Put the drift pin in, and that's good. That's the way it's supposed to work. The difficulty really begins with the fact that the repair manual, the despair manual, it's the Spently, I call it the Spently despair manual for this vehicle, does not give adequate timing information, and there's a whole bunch of little tricky things. Well, first of all, I needed to advance the crank so that the timing mark down here lines up. This is a nice spot with a 12-point 19 millimeter socket with a cheater extension on it. So you can advance the crank there. Then you also have to have it lined up here. Your mark would be on this tooth right about there, and your mark on the wall is there. So once those two are lined up, your exhaust cam is lined up. Now the other point you want is that this mark right here is going to be, when the chain goes on, this mark here will be right there on that next tooth over, because we're going to have to push this, turn it that way. So your mark on the intake cam is right here, and you want that as close to being on the top as it'll go. Alright, so now I'm going to take time to do the seal on the cover, which has been patched here with the epoxy there, the JB Weld epoxy and the heavy duty tape. Of course, you've got an oil port here. You got to be careful not to get the sealant in there. Now in the wintertime, I use the Prussian blue. Is not really a sealer, but you know, it works okay in cold weather. Better thing is to use the real Permatex blue RTV. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to use a Q-tip to apply it. It's a little bit easier when you get down into areas like that. I've prepped the area by putting my sealer on here. I prepped the edge there. I also prepped underneath this gasket. You want to be careful not to get your sealant in this hole. That's an oil port, which is necessary for operating the camshaft adjuster. So the area is prepped. I'm pinned in the tensioner. And my camshaft adjuster and chain is located right here. So this being the key element, we'll take a look at the back of that, and there's your timing mark right there. The timing mark on this one is a little bit off from top, just before top. It's on that one, and that's normal, and you'll want it to be end up right on top here. So we're going to use a tool to rotate that when we put it in place. Now the distance between this mark and that mark is 20 chain holes, including the tooth in the first hole and including the tooth in the last hole, 20 holes altogether. Okay, so I'm getting set up here. Now I'm reusing the original tensioner that has the end broken off. So the skid pad is broken off on that end, and the aluminum tab is broken off so that they're not going to break off again. This does have a slight groove worn on the shaft in here that I filed down so that it won't be as abrupt of a hammering stop every time it hits. It's a fairly small amount of oil that flows through to avoid excessive wear. So in setting this up, I set this copper colored tooth onto the mark on that one. And then starting at 1 here, I count 20 over to the mark that's on the back side of this, a mark on the sprocket there. So it's 20 spaces inclusive, including the marked teeth. So 20 altogether. Then it's just a matter of getting the alignment pin to go in there once you rotate this forward a little bit, and using the specialty tool, which is not a poly drive. It's not a multi-point poly drive. It's not a ribe. It is a specialty tool. No matter what anybody else says, it's you know, it's kind of costly.